Hey, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri Appellate Attorney. I'm retired, and this is not legal advice. Everything I say is simply commenting on the law. And this will be what we're commenting on today. So today we're going to look at the direct examination of one of the defense's witnesses, a defense psychologist, who is called by Chloe Driver essentially to establish that she was not sane at the time that all of these events took place. And expert witnesses occupy a unique role in our justice system in that they are not supposed to be advocates for one side or the other. They are supposed to be the pro from Dover who comes in to tell it like it is. But in fact, everybody understands that that's not really the case. Every now and again, you will find an expert who is just so good at what they do that they can come off appearing to be above the fray even while they are advocating strenuously for the person who's paying them. And of course, one of the things that is one of the chief attacks, I should say, on these witnesses when you get them on the stand is, well, how much money are you being paid to testify here today? But that line of attack is not going to work here. And the reason it's not going to work is because this expert is paid by the state of Georgia. So there's not going to be any fireworks there. The first thing the expert needs to do is develop a rapport with the jury, very much in the same way that they develop a rapport with the person that they are interviewing in order to reach a diagnosis. So this expert witness comes off very affable, very collected. She's together. She has a rather interesting background in terms of being a forensic psychologist. Let's listen to her tell us that.
Now, Ms. Garrett, I'm going to refer to you as in your professional title, Dr. Garrett. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And can you please explain to the jury how you're currently employed
I work for the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities.
and what do you do for? Well, tell the jury a little bit about what the Department of Behavioral Health and Disabilities is.
So it's an overall department in Georgia. Oh,
Oh,
sorry about that.
sorry.
It is the department in Georgia that oversees mental health services. It covers a variety of things like outpatient services, hospitals, and also the part that I'm involved in is forensic services. So my job is to go in and do court-ordered mental health evaluations.
And those court-ordered mental health evaluations, are those typically for defendants that are facing criminal charges in the jury?
They are all for defendants who are facing criminal charges.
Typically, how long have you worked at DBHDD?
For about 8 years.
And was that your first job out of school?
It was.
In psychology, I guess I shouldn't be specific.
Yes, it was my first psychological job.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a few minutes. And what did you do, or what have you also done while you've been working with DBHDD?
I have a private practice on the side, but I can't do any state court or superior court cases in Georgia for conflict of interest, so I do federal cases.
Okay, and those federal cases that you handle, are those similar to the ones you handle with your work as DBHDD?
Typically, they're a little different. In those cases, I'm usually doing mitigation evaluations. That's looking at what kind of psychological factors were involved in the person's background that may have influenced their behaviors. So it's not about whether they were competent or whether they were insane, but whether there's any psychological factors that should be considered at sentencing.
Okay, so not specific responsibility evaluations or competency evaluations as you conduct.
Not as frequently.
Okay, but have you had a chance to do some of
I've
those
done
in the
some
federal system?
competency evaluations, but I haven't done any criminal responsibility evaluations in federal court.
Okay, and do you have any other work that you do in the field of psychology?
Not at this time.
Okay, all right.
I did do police fitness for duty type evaluations.
Okay, you did do that previously, but not doing that
But I'm not doing it anymore.
currently. Okay, tell us a little bit about your educational background, if you may.
I got my undergraduate degree in psychology from Duke back in 1998. Then I went to law school at the University of Arizona. I graduated from law school in 2003 and came back to Georgia and practiced law here in Georgia for about 8 years before returning to graduate school out in Oregon at Pacific University, where I got a master's and a doctorate PsyD in clinical and forensic psychology in 2016.
So you're telling this jury that after 6 years of practicing law, you did not want to continue doing that?
I did not.
Okay. You might have to explain that to the rest of us here. When you, how long did it take you to get your, it's a PsyD, is that what it's referred
It's a
to?
doctoral degree in psychology.
Okay. And how long did it take you to obtain that degree?
I had 4 years of coursework and then a year of practicum that I did after I completed the coursework. That was a full-time placement at Georgia Regional Hospital, Atlanta. And then I went and did a full year of internship that specialized in forensics at a hospital in Maryland called Springfield Hospital Center. After I completed that, I was able to get my degree, and then I spent another year there doing a postdoctoral degree education, also specifically in forensics. So I spent 2 years total at Springfield Hospital Center.
So, did you catch that? She was a lawyer for 6 years before she went to become a forensic psychologist. Now, she doesn't give it away and explain what kind of lawyer she was before she went into this line of work, but my guess would probably be that she was a defense lawyer and a criminal defense lawyer at that, and that she pursued this line of study because she felt like she could probably make more money as an expert witness than she could as a lawyer. And perhaps that's true. I don't know what the state of Georgia is paying her, but it's probably not working out that way if she thought that, she was going to get rich being an expert witness. When you work for the state of Georgia, I don't imagine they make you particularly wealthy. But it's important to point out that she is not a medical doctor. In other words, she's not a psychiatrist. She can't write prescriptions for medication, for example. But what she can do is she can talk with people and provide therapy on a direct level with people who have some kind of mental disease or diagnosis. And that's what she's doing in this case. Let's hear a little bit more about her.
A criminal responsibility evaluation is how the person was doing at the time of the alleged crime. So that answer could be very different depending on how much time has passed. So we have to look back and see what was going on in their life at the time of the crime.
So in this case, the criminal responsibility piece is looking at Ms. Driver around the December 8, 2020 timeframe, correct?
Correct.
And the competency evaluation is looking at her at the time that you conduct that actual evaluation,
That's correct.
because that is geared towards her case moving forward and whether she can be an assistance with that case and understands what she's going through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, you did the competency evaluation. You found her to be competent to stand trial, ultimately, right? That's not an issue that you're talking about today.
That's correct.
Yeah. When you did that competency evaluation, how long did you spend with her when you conducted that initial interview?
About an hour and 45 minutes.
Okay.
Actually, sorry, at that time it was 2 hours and 35 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to make sure we were correct. That was in August of 2022, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that was 2 hours and 35 minutes at the Cherokee County Detention Center with Ms. Driver.
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall in that report, do you have the competency report with you as well?
I do.
I think this is the same for both evaluations, but you listed sources of information that you had in that evaluation. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And you listed several things, including Ms. Driver's, some records from Ms. Driver at the jail, hospital, medical records from her at the jail, correct?
That's correct.
Reviewed her Wellstar Kennestone Hospital records as well.
I did.
Specifically, some handwritten notes that she had made during the course of that stay at the hospital. Is that fair?
That's correct.
You said you had the indictment, a summary report from the City of Canton Police regarding their investigation. and you had a evaluation that had been conducted by a privately retained expert, in this case, Dr. Roberta Ballard, too. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And you had the opportunity, I presume, to review all of those things before you went and saw Ms. Driver?
Some things I reviewed before and some things I reviewed after.
Okay.
Like to get her jail records, I had to get her to sign a release of information, so I got that information after.
Okay. Okay. So when you went and met with her in August, she signed a release form for you to obtain the records from the jail.
That's correct.
And you reviewed those after your evaluation.
But
Okay.
before I wrote the report. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Did you ever reach out to myself or Ms. Trethewey to obtain any additional information that you would need for your evaluation of Ms. Driver on either incident?
I don't recall reaching out to counsel.
Okay. Um, so tell me specifically, when you meet with Ms. Driver, how do you go about discussing these issues with her? I assume there's some sort of rapport you're trying to establish with her so she can be honest with you. Is that fair?
There's sort of we call it sort of a forensic rapport.
Okay.
There's, we're not overly friendly, but we're obviously, accepting and empathetic. We always start with an advisement of what their rights are. We let them know that it's not confidential. We let them know that they do not have to answer our questions, that they have the right to consult with their attorney, and that anything that they tell us can be included in a report, and we might have to come to court and testify, and that the information can be used at sentencing.
This is good lawyering on the part of the defense attorney here. He's getting her background established for the jury, laying out the things that she reviewed, and giving her time to explain why those things might be important in the formation of her opinion. And her opinion is interesting in the way that it develops. Let's listen to that.
Did she describe to you, did Ms. Driver specifically describe to you the nature of how her relationship with Mr. Ben Michael was in the beginning and how it developed over the, about three years she was with him?
She described meeting him when she was 16 years old, sitting at a bus station, I believe, and that she found him charming and intelligent and engaging, and he gave her his contact information. And about a year later, when she was 17, she reached out to him, and he accepted her in, and they began a romantic relationship at that point when he was 38 or 39 years old.
Does the age discrepancy between Mr. Ben Michael and Ms. Driver at that time, did that cause you concern, or did that play into your consideration of her evaluation?
Yeah, it was one of several factors. Between her sort of unstable childhood, the sort of push and pull with her parents, returning to her parents, leaving her parents, things like that, her substance abuse, and her young age, all made her, in my view, particularly susceptible to wanting to be with somebody who's older and willing to take her in and protect her and things like that. So I felt like that may have been a factor in why she chose to join this group.
So now we know why she joined a cult and what the impact of meeting Mr. Ben Michael, or Michael Ben, whatever his name is, had on her, and how she was already sort of primed for that by her background. She's doing a good job of narrating a story that the jury can follow. The main import of her testimony, of course, is that it's establishing some reason and some rationale for why she might have flipped her lid, blown a gasket, whatever you want to say, with respect to how she acted toward her child. Now, whether or not the jury buys into that or not, hard to say, but certainly she's making a compelling case for compassion, I'll say that much.
She talked about, on sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, sort of a grandiose delusion that she had special powers and special skills. And that started back when she was a teen, with believing that she could read minds and that people could read her mind and things like that. It continued with this sort of magical thinking, that things that she did could impact the world. So if she, walked the right way, talked the right way, breathed the right way, then it would be good for the world. If she walked the wrong way, breathed the wrong way, talked the wrong way, that it could be bad for the world. And that is sort of she also talked about delusions of reference, which I also talked about before, thinking that somebody's facial expression, that they were giving them a specific message and not like I don't like you message, like, because people glare at you. We all do that, right? But she's talking more about somebody would talk about death in a completely different context. And she interpreted that as they're telling me specifically that I have to kill myself, that kind of thing. She would see a knife just lying out in somebody's kitchen where it's supposed to be. And she would see that and she would interpret that as that's a sign that I need to kill myself and my baby, cut my throat. So she had a lot of that was going back at least a month or two before this actually happened.
And you were able to observe or identify those delusions based on what Ms. Driver was telling you, number one, right?
Yeah.
And also, you were seeing that from some collateral sources in this case based on statements made in the investigative summary from the police department.
That's correct. And she said it to the jail.
Yes. So, for example, if she was, like an example of a delusion to her could be a fellow inmate at the jail saying that her grandmother died, she could interpret as a statement to her that she needed to kill herself.
She could. That's not one of the ones she specifically mentioned. She mentioned being at a 12 Tribes event where they were talking or preaching about being accepting of death. And she interpreted that as the sign that it was time.
And experts such as yourself, particularly in the field of psychology, can have disagreements about someone's diagnosis.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're just people. We do our best. We can make mistakes. We can interpret things differently. And that's not even necessarily a mistake. People interpret things differently. And then there's also a lot of gray area. So you might say, well, she doesn't have schizoaffective disorder. She's got bipolar disorder with psychotic features. It's the same factors. It's the same symptoms, just they align a little bit differently. So people may disagree on whether it's this one or that one, or whether it's an unspecified psychotic disorder because it seems a little different than your normal psychotic disorder, which could be impacted by lifestyle and things like that. So yeah, there's gray area. There's a lot of room for different ways of interpreting, different ways of seeing evidence. And everything has to come from a human as well. So we get our information. Ms. Driver is a human. The people at the jail who took down notes about what she did are humans. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody interprets things through their own lens. So yes, there is room for disagreement.
But your final conclusion is that she definitely suffered from these disorders that you have diagnosed her with, and was.
I am confident that she was experiencing delusions. I'm confident that those delusions included paranoia, delusions of reference, and magical thinking. She also reported auditory and visual hallucinations. She also described and exhibited both depressive mood and sort of hypomanic manic mood that I was able to see both sides of that coin. So yes, there may be different ways of arriving at what the actual name of the diagnosis is, but I am confident in the symptoms that I observed and documented.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Now, if her job was to give the defense hey, she was insane at the time of the crime evidence, I don't think she made the grade. I think she tried very hard. She certainly threw out a lot of terms and again, created a fairly compelling case for compassion. But now you have an expert who is going to sit for cross-examination. And the cross-examination doesn't go nearly as long as the nearly 2 hours of testimony that went before it. Instead, the prosecution gets up and hits a home run with their very first question.
All right. Cross-examination.
Dr. Garrett, what percentage of the population has a mental health disorder?
Oh, I don't know. Do not know the answer to that question.
Okay.
Now, you notice what she does there is she gets this answer that's really kind of incredible. You're the expert. You know psychology better than anybody. You're the pro from Dover. You're here to tell us all about how poor Chloe was mistreated in the world, and you don't know how many people have mental disorders. It seems to me like a statistic that a psychologist might be aware of or might have the ability to look up. You know, yeah, again, it might have been a trick question, but the fact of the matter is, not knowing that does sort of impeach her a little bit. And it really only got better from there. And here is a good example of how you take pegs away from the opinion by essentially death of a thousand paper cuts. Let's watch.
And you'd agree that having a mental health diagnosis is not the same question as whether somebody is criminally responsible, correct?
Absolutely not, no.
Okay. And somebody can have schizoaffective disorder and still be criminally responsible.
They can,
And somebody can have borderline personality disorder and still be criminally responsible.
they can,
And somebody can have cannabis use disorder and still be held criminally responsible.
yes.
Okay. I want to talk to you specifically. I'll go back sort of to the beginning. You talked about how one of the things you diagnosed her with was cannabis use disorder. And in your report, isn't it true that you indicated that Ms. Driver told you that she believed that that CBD had high levels of THC in it?
Yes, she told me that.
Okay. And when you were testifying about the reasons for your diagnosing her with cannabis use disorder, you talked about the intoxicating effects of THC, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And so in making that diagnosis, are you assuming that there was THC in that substance?
Yes,
Okay. And so if you learned that when she went to the hospital on December the 8th, she was tested and she tested negative for THC and the substance was tested and only tested positive for CBD, would that change your diagnosis?
yes.
Okay.
I think if I were the prosecutor, I might have stopped right there. You don't know basic statistics about your profession. You admit all of these things might very well also, all of the things could very well relate to being clinically sane, at least as far as knowing the difference between right and wrong. And then you come to this question about, well, did you assume this? Well, yes, I did. And of course, everybody knows what happens when you assume. You make a donkey out of you and me, so to speak. And that's what she says. Yeah, I assumed that. And now, well, if I told you that this was on the lab reports and that she didn't have any of this in her system, would that change your diagnosis? Well, yes, it would. Okay, game over. I mean, at this point, the jury has heard everything in 2 minutes that it needs to know, that this gal is there as an advocate and not really as a neutral arbiter of whether or not Chloe Driver is sane. Now, again, that's my personal opinion. I don't think she did anything wrong. I think she testified honestly. I think she gave what she had to give, because that, even if that was a trick question, she had to answer it honestly. She answered it honestly, and she's going to have to count on the defense to clean it up on redirect if necessary. The bottom line here is that this is an excellent tutorial on defense expert witnesses of any kind in a criminal case. They get up, they do their testimony, and then they face cross-examination, and this is how they are cross-examined. They look for the things that they didn't notice, what they didn't do, and then they use that as a wedge to separate her from her opinion. And in some cases, I've actually seen witnesses change their opinion on the stand. That's what I have for you today. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. I thought it was an interesting look at this particular psychologist. I think if I had a client who was facing, a potential long prison sentence by virtue of having done what this woman did, this would probably be the person that I want on the stand, because she does a really good job of, again, humanizing the victim here, or I should say, she does a really good job of humanizing the person who is on trial while not demonizing the victim. And she does a good job of that. And she testified, I thought, very credibly. It's just that when you're talking about psychology, it's almost a pseudoscience, in that you will never get 5 psychologists to agree on any one thing. They may, two of them may agree, but there's always going to be disagreement. And I think that as a profession, psychologists and psychiatrists too have a long way to go to get to the point where they're really experts in the human mind. Probably because the human mind can be pretty fantastically corrupted in many people. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have the opportunity today, go out of your way, do something nice for somebody. Kindness heals wounds that the naked eye can't see. And if you do that, you make somebody's day better today, you'll have done a good thing. If you have any comments, drop them in the comments down below or email me at the address above. Like, share, subscribe, all those things YouTube people tell you to do. I always tell you to do at the end if you've enjoyed the video. Thanks again for being here, and catch me down here at the beach again next week. I shouldn't have to say this, but you don't seek legal advice from a guy down at the beach. You seek it from a lawyer in a lawyer's office, where there are people running around in suits and secretaries and all kinds of other people. I'm just a YouTuber. I'm a retired attorney at this point, and although I retain my license to practice in the state of Missouri, I am not here dispensing legal advice. I'm just offering general content on the law. And here are some videos that YouTube thinks you may enjoy.